Greetings, my beloved clients and friends. I wanted to talk to you today about Bitcoin because yesterday President Biden signed an executive order regarding Bitcoin, and I wanted to talk about maybe some of the implications of that. So what it suggests is that Bitcoin is moving towards legitimacy. Okay, it's gaining more mainstream acceptance, and the president is acknowledging that it's not. We can no longer say that it's a fly by night, flash in the pan. Well, maybe it still is, but the likelihood of that is going down quite a bit. That institutions, governments, corporations are lending it much more legitimacy, and so he says, as a government, we should try to get in front of this and not behind it, and try to be the world leader in legitimizing Bitcoin, and part of that would be to regulate it. So, is that a good thing? I would say yes. And imagine, for example, the stock market, and you look at the history of Wall Street going back 300 years, and it started out as very speculative and just on the corner of the street, these guys trading and putting it in their top hats, and it started gaining more popularity, but for the longest time there was still a lot of I guess unsavory characters, you could call them, or shysters or swindlers. That, I mean, it was a place where you had to exercise a lot of caution, and because it was unregulated, and they kind of self-regulated, but then after the crash of '29 and the pain that it caused the country, the government started putting in measures to make it much more regulated, which is good, right? To clean it up and to put some rules in place, and so that it wouldn't be such a haven for nefarious operators, right? And there were acts in the 33 Act, the 34 Act, the 48, all these acts to clean it up, and it has continued. Even in 2008, they were tightening it up again, after the 2008 crisis. So, but over that time, it went from, it has become an institution, a respected institution, and its value has increased because of that, because it's been recognized and regulated. So the same thing you could say is happening to Bitcoin, and hopefully with similar results, that it goes from a illegitimate backwater, whatever you want to call it, to a legitimate, recognized, regulated institution, and that's going to add value to it. Okay, and for a more recent example, I think about the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And so they started in, the first UFC one was in 1993. So it's about 28 years old, right? And it was just mayhem, and it was totally unregulated. There was no rules, no holds bars fighting. Guys would go in there, there was a guy was wearing one boxing glove, and some guys had boots, some guys didn't, and some guys wore a gi, and there was, and most states wouldn't allow it, and as it started becoming popular, they had to do their fights like in Alabama and Mississippi and places that somehow they would get approval for this, and network TV, or it was a backwater, just the guys were all on steroids, and nevertheless it became popular, and it struck a nerve, and it became popular, and governments were furious. It's like, this is human cockfighting, and there was, battles in the courts, and they're like, you need to get rid of this or clean it up. And so they did. They cleaned it up, and now, it's on network TV. It's gone global, and it's becoming an institution. And in that process, it's become very valuable. So it was started in 1993, and it was really struggling because of all its legal troubles, among other things. And they sold it in pretty much a fire sale on the verge of bankruptcy for $2 million to the Fertitta brothers in 2001. So it was 8 years old when they sold it for $2 million. And somehow the Fertitta brothers cleaned it up. They brought legitimacy to it, and they got it on network TV, and they regulated, they put rules, they tried to clean up the drug use, and they abided by, state regulations. And guess what happened? 15 years later, that company that they had bought for $2 million, they sold it for $4 billion, okay? A 2,000x return, not 2,000%, 2,000x. 2 million went to 4 billion in 15 years. Okay, now I'm sure they put some money into it, so they probably had some additional costs above their initial 2 million, but still a phenomenal return, because they oversaw that transition from, this thing that's done in the dark to this thing that's out in the open, and it's regulated, and they have no problem with the legal requirements, and they could hold their events in the top venues around the country and around the world, Madison Square Garden and Las Vegas. And I'm not saying that Madison Square Garden is a bastion of legality, but it's much more legitimate, right? So, and I believe that Bitcoin is on that path to legitimacy, and as it continues on that path, it will allow governments, institutions, corporations to feel much more comfortable participating in that, which will bring value, because there's a finite amount of Bitcoin. So I started investing in Bitcoin for myself and my clients back in the fourth quarter of 2020. It's about a year and a half ago. And I had heard some respected people talking about it, and speaking highly of it. And so I didn't really understand it. So I took some time, about 2 weeks, to do a deep dive and really wrap my head around what it was, and it made sense to me. So we started investing in it. And one of the things that, it's very volatile, but it's been averaging about 100% a year return for like the last 10 years. Average, okay? So what has been my results? So if we started buying it at 10, it doubled to 20, it doubled again to 40. That's about where it is now, in that range. It's very volatile, but that's about the range that it's been at. So it's on track to double every year, at least in the year and a half that I've owned it. And I would not be one bit surprised if by the end of 2023, when I have owned it 3 years, it will have doubled 3 times, meaning going from 10 to 20 to 40 to 80. And it would not surprise me one bit after I have owned it for 4 years, it will have doubled 4 times. 100% annual return from 10 to 20 to 40 to 80 to 160. Okay, is it a straight line up? Absolutely not. It's very volatile. Very volatile. But what would you expect for 100% type of returns? And I imagine as it transitions to legitimacy, the volatility will come down a little bit, and the average return will come down a little bit too, or more than a little bit, right? It's not going to double every year forever. Maybe, probably not. I can't say that for sure, but it probably will not double every year forever. Okay, but so this is just a quick video to think about the meaning of Biden signing this executive order. It's just a signal that Bitcoin is on the path to legitimacy, and as it continues on that path, it should be good for the long-term owners of that currency. Now, obviously, there are some risks. One, it's very volatile. Two, there's a risk that another cryptocurrency could become the dominant cryptocurrency beside Bitcoin, right? It could be dethroned. But there's some advantages to being the first mover. So just something to think about, to look through the short-term volatility of Bitcoin and look at the long-term progression. And it when you see that, you could see more clearly why it might be a good investment, and how to look through and not be so moved by the short-term volatility. Okay, so and that holds for investing in general. I mean, if you take the long view, you could look through the short-term volatility if you understand what the big long-term picture is, and where we're heading long-term. So just a thought. Hope you guys have a great day.